Exposed, 12 haunted rules every rural Canadian officer fears. The sinister truth is cursed. Officer Jenna Malone stepped into the mist-laden chill of her hometown, the air heavy with a foreboding silence that wrapped around her like a shroud. She was back, drawn into this place of childhood memories now twisted into nightmares by the unknown disappearance of her brother, Eric. Eerie whispers curled around her, creeping through the alleys and brushing past the old storefronts that stood like silent sentinels against the cutting winds. The atmosphere weighed on her chest, every shadow seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if the very ground harbored secrets it was desperate to keep. She recalled the tales twisted about the woods, the legends masked as children's stories, keeping the naive at bay from the grips of something darker. But now those whims edged the horizon of her thoughts, tangling with the very present dread of not finding Eric. Her flashlight flickered over the cracked pavement, illuminating grotesque tree stumps, their shapes twisted into faces frozen in horror. As Jenna stepped into the sheriff's office, she was met with dismissive comments from Sheriff Davis, an old friend who had known her family for years. "This isn't the first time Eric's wandered off. He's just having one of his episodes," he said, brushing her concerns aside with an ease that turned her stomach. She saw the skepticism in his eyes, but there was something behind it, the slightest flicker of unease that tugged at the corners of her mind. The townsfolk whispered as she walked past, shifting their gazes to the ground or avoiding her altogether when she mentioned Eric's name. Their silence screamed that something was wrong, that a veil of fear kept them shackled, eyes darting like prey sensing danger. Jenna felt their words hang thick in the air, like a fog that carried secrets and lies. Before she could push further, she stumbled upon a dusty collection of old reports tucked away in the corner of the office. 12 haunted rules, they began, a series of ominous mandates rural officers adhered to, whispered amongst trusted circles. They read like a twisted fairy tale, designed to keep families safe from an ancient evil. At first, she laughed it off as superstition, yet as she delved deeper, unease wormed its way into her heart. They spoke of things that stalked the woods, unspeakable horrors concealed by the endless canopy, and Jenna could almost feel their eyes bearing down on her. As night fell, the woods transformed into a labyrinth of whispers. Darkness clung to the trees, warping shadows beneath her flashlight beam. The cold seeped inside her, freezing fear solid in her bones. This community, she thought, is bound by something much darker. Jenna's heart raced when she crossed paths with a fellow officer, their hushed words spilling forth like a dam breaking. "You don't know, do you? They talk about it, just keep your head low, follow the rules." The warnings echoed in her ears. Suddenly, in the suffocating silence, a cry split the night, her brother's voice, drawn out and desperate, drifting from the depths of the woods. The sheer panic ignited her pulse. Should she follow it, risking whatever lurked in the dark, or retreat back into the safety of the sheriff's office? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The shadows around her seemed to pulse with untold stories as she stood frozen. The air crackled with anticipation, charged with a malevolence that made her skin crawl. Deep down, she sensed the truth: this place was more than haunted, it was cursed. And in that moment, Jenna realized the depth of the darkness she faced. What if the true monster was not in the woods, but among the very people she once trusted? The haunting whispers grew louder, pulling Jenna deeper into the unknown. Her decision loomed large as the darkness closed in. With every racing heartbeat, she understood, venturing into the night could unveil more than just her brother's fate, it could unearth the very souls hidden beneath a friendly facade. Jenna stood on the precipice of the woods, the trees towering above her like jagged teeth ready to swallow anything that dared to enter. The chill wrapped around her, but it wasn't just the cold, it was the creeping dread that gnawed at her gut, urging her to flee, yet the echo of Eric's voice, a haunting melody tinged with anguish, pulled her forward. She tightened her grip on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the oppressive blackness ahead. "Eric!" she called, her voice trembling, swallowed by the night. A rustle answered from within the darkness, and a cold sweat beaded on her forehead. Was it him, or something else? Uproarious fear clawed at the back of her mind, warning her of the unseen dangers lurking just beyond the immediate grasp of light. She took her first step into the wild, the earth beneath her feet soft and yielding, yet seemingly alive. Each crunch of leaves and snap of twigs was magnified, reverberating in the stillness like a death knell. The trees loomed closer now, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands. "Just breath," she muttered to herself, but her heart was a wild drumbeat, echoing louder with every step deeper into the night. The cold seemed to seep into her bones, and as she advanced, the whispers morphed into something tangible, a cacophony of disembodied voices layered with laughter and cries. They were laced with despair, twirling around her relentlessly, like a gust of wind from a grave. Suddenly, a flash caught her eye, a glimpse of movement in the distance, just at the edge of her flashlight's reach. "Eric!" she shouted again, though this time a tremor laced her voice. The flicker darted behind a massive oak trunk, deep and ancient. Fear mingled with hope, igniting her legs into action. Jenna approached the tree, breathing heavily now. The whispers crescendoed, breaking through into a furious rush of noise that made her head spin. "Keep walking, keep moving," she willed herself. But as she rounded the tree, her breath hitched, freezing in her throat. There, carved into the bark, were strange symbols, runes marked with a sickly black substance oozing down, forming a trail leading further into the woods. "What are you doing, Jenna?" she scolded herself. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to turn back, but the image of Eric hunched on this cursed ground fueled her resolve. She brushed her fingers against the symbols, feeling a jolt ripple through her, like a warning surge, knowing exactly what she was treading upon. "You mustn't follow," a voice slithered from the darkness, barely more than a whisper. Jenna's heart plummeted into her stomach. She swung around, flashlight beam darting helplessly in the black, illuminating nothing but the night's oppressive silence. "Who's there?" she demanded, voice trembling, panic rising like bile. The answer came in a raspy chuckle, reverberating around her, echoing from God knows where. The laughter was devoid of joy, rich only in malice. "You should listen to the rules, you should have never returned." Jenna's eyes darted, desperation igniting her heart. Was her own hometown warning her away? Was the nightmare she had returned to settle rooted in those innocent fairy tales woven around the now dying embers of her childhood? "No, I have to find him," she yelled defiantly, pushing back against their whispers. "I won't leave him." "Then you are already lost," came the echo, growing softer, fainter, fading into the dark that felt alive. The cold clung to her, tightening its grip, urging her to obey the cryptic warnings that etched themselves into her mind. Then, from the trees to her left, she spotted a flicker again. Light? Or a trap? A decision loomed, heavy and suffocating in the air around her. Would she risk it all, venture further into the twisted woods, or return to the safety of ignorance? Panic surged through her as she wrestled with the choice. What awaited in the shadows? What if she crossed that threshold, only to find not Eric but the source of the horror lurking among the townsfolk? In that moment of decision, the darkness rippled, and a chilling howl echoed through the woods, a howl painfully close, a sound that crystallized an irrevocable truth. The woods were alive, and they knew her name. With her heart pounding like a war drum, Jenna stepped forward, and then, from the depths of the forest, echoed another sound, her brother's laugh, high-pitched and distorted, twisting in the air. It led her deeper into the chaos, blending into the shadows like a ghost. Was it an invitation or a warning? The laughter faded, replaced by a heavy silence that settled like fog over the forest floor. Jenna's heart raced, thrumming violently in her chest. The light flickering at the edge of the trees was brighter now, flickering with an urgency that beckoned her to approach. She could almost feel Eric's presence mingling with the chilling air, his essence a tether urging her onward. The gnarled roots twisted beneath her feet, begging for her to trip. Shadows played tricks at the edges of her vision, morphing into nightmarish shapes that lurked just out of sight. Each step stirred the scent of damp earth and decay. She fought against the feeling of being preyed upon, moving deeper into the looming darkness, flashlight beam cutting through the night like a desperate lifeline. "Hold on, Eric," she called, her voice hoarse. The silence embraced her long after her words faded, stretching into an agonizing void. Nothing responded but the soft rustle of leaves, as if the woods were listening, waiting. The symbols on the ancient oak etched themselves in her mind, a language of the forsaken. She had studied folklore, ghost stories, cursed towns, but this was something more. The tales of lost souls echoing in the forest turned flesh and bone in that moment. As if the woods themselves whispered in her ear, "Don't believe the stories you heard." Jenna halted, her breath fogging before her in the chilled air. She wished for a moment she could dismiss it all, turn around, and run. But a desperate ache gnawed within, a blend of hope and dread propelling her forward. She squeezed her eyes shut for a second, and when she opened them again, she stepped toward the glow. "Mistakes were made," came a voice, slow and slippery, intertwining with her thoughts. She whipped around, glaring into the encroaching darkness, but there was no one there. "You're already tainted. You can't rescue him." "No." Her voice was a fierce defiance against the electric air heavy with accusations. "He is still in there." With renewed determination, Jenna pressed on. The beam of her flashlight trembled, revealing a path slick with strange black sludge. Fear tightened around her throat, choking her resolve. The voices crescendoed again, a haunting symphony of despair. Suddenly, her flashlight flickered, the beam sputtering as if sensing the malice that shrouded her. Panic surged, she frantically shook the flashlight. Just as darkness threatened to engulf her, she caught sight of movement ahead, a shadow, darting and weaving through the trees. "Eric!" she shouted, her voice cracking. No response, only the mockery of the wind. She stepped closer, but with every move deeper into the unknown, the forest seemed to shift, the trees closing in around her, warping and whispering dreadful secrets. The laughter returned, shrill and unholy, reverberating like a bell tolling for the damned. "Turn back before it's too late," the forest sighed, the earth beneath her trembling, as if acknowledging a darker entity guarding its depths. Jenna held her breath, clenching the flashlight with white-knuckled intensity, as she fought through the fear. Painful memories surged. Their childhood stories became nightmares, whispering of lost siblings and blood-deep rituals that tempted fate. And just then, the shadows around her burst forth, distorting just enough for her to glimpse a figure. A boy, no taller than her waist. It was Eric, but his eyes were voids echoing shades of something absent, something terrifying. His gaze locked onto hers, and all at once, a shrill giggle pierced the night, melding with the murmur of the trees. "Help me, Jenna," he pleaded, yet his voice twisted, like a chipper melody turned to sinister notes, drenching her in dread. Jenna's feet moved only out of shock. But as she stepped toward him, a thunderous crack shattered the stillness. A branch crashed to the ground nearby, dislodging a multitude of leaves that cascaded down like falling stars, and in that moment, the woods rejected her hope. Darkness surged, shifting around her like a living thing, and the laughter escalated to a frantic echo. "You shouldn't have come back." Jenna froze, terror clawing at her throat. Was that truly her brother, or a dark mirage crafted by the forest? The ground began to tremble, and something darker stirred in the depths, a presence awakening, a hunger, and just as the darkness pressed closer, she saw it, a pair of gleaming eyes watching from the shadows. Who or what was lurking in the dark, ready to claim her next? Jenna's mind raced, a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. The eyes watching her from the dense underbrush glinted like shards of glass, cold and unyielding. Her breath came in short gasps, and she fought the instinct to scream as shadows flickered and danced around her. This was not just the forest, it was something much worse. "Jenna," the voice echoed again, more pleading this time. It carried a weight, a burden that knotted in her stomach. "You have to help me." She took a shaky step back, the soft ground squishing beneath her sneakers. No. This wasn't Eric. Where was the boy she grew up with? The voice was an echo, twisted by the sinister forces of the woods. Panic set in a sick clenching in her gut as she pondered the darkness threatening to consume her. The laughing drifted around her, taunting, each giggle like a secret weapon aimed to pierce her hope. You shouldn't have come back. It wrapped around her like a black shroud, seeping into her skin, urging her to succumb to despair. Stop! She shouted, though her voice trembled. I want to let you take him. The shadows shifted, and for a fleeting moment, the true essence of her brother flickered in his void-like eyes. I'm lost, he whispered. The world spun, and she fought to steady herself against the intoxicating despair threatening to overwhelm her. An ache gripped her chest. Suddenly, the laughter morphed into frantic whispers circling her, warning her about the price of her choice, drowning out her resolve. They weren't just shadows anymore. They were thoughts, memories broken and scattered, calling to her from the dark corners of her mind. Eric! She shouted, desperation lacing her tone, but a low growl echoed from beyond the trees, heavy and animalistic. The darkness shifted, pulling apart to reveal something enormous and grotesque, silhouetted against the backdrop of hallowed ground. It slithered from the shadows, limbs impossibly long, and it sniffed the air, as if tasting her fear. The icy grip of terror tightened around her spine. She was now the hunted. Jenna stumbled backward, but every move felt like a step into quicksand, each footfall dragging her deeper into the gloom. The gleaming eyes multiplied, surrounding her, ravenous and mocking. Time lost its meaning. Seconds stretched, expanding in a spiral of dread. What was she doing? Turning toward the darkness, abandoning the boy she loved? Or abandoning herself to the unknown? Help me! The voice trembled, but the shadowy creature coiled around, blocking her escape. The deeper whispers grew louder, more insistent, pulling at her, beckoning her towards them. Join us. Something horrific scratched against the bark of nearby trees, 100 fingernails against wood, plucking the strings of her sanity. She couldn't think. Fear fueled her fight or flight response as instinct blasted through her. In a rush, Jenna lunged toward Eric, reaching for him through the darkness. But he began to dissolve, slipping between her fingers, his laughter blending with the chaos ringing in her ears. She could almost touch him. Almost an excruciating shriek erupted from the shadows, more feral than human, pulling at her heartstrings. No! She gasped, yanking her arm back, pushing against the primal instinct to flee. That sense of doom offered no sanctuary, no comfort. Stay with me. Eric's voice sliced through the din. You must see the truth before it's too late. But her heart thundered, each beat pushing her toward survival. She tore her gaze from him, scanning the oppressive darkness for any sign of escape. Something moved, a flicker, a change in the air. The ground under her shifted, roots reached to ensnare her, twisting like serpents, pulling her closer to the gaping maw of darkness. Jenna! Eric's voice faded, drowned in the cacophony. You need to. The creature lunged, and terror slammed into her like an icy wave. She bolted. Each step cracking twigs and leaves beneath her as she dashed into the murky depths, knowing the forest itself was alive and hunting her. As she ran, Jenna felt a chill cover her skin like fingers brushing against her. Tantalizing, inviting her to turn around to come back, but she couldn't. The woods twisted and turned, and just when Jenna thought she had found a clear path, she stumbled onto a circle of stones, ancient and unyielding. The air thickened around her as she realized she was not alone. Figures clad in rags emerged from behind the trees, faces obscured but eyes glinting with haunting familiarity. Each wore a smile that was wrong. One stepped forward, the light from her flashlight illuminating a face she recognized, twisted and contorted with a mix of malice and expectation. Welcome, she said softly, voice dripping with ancient knowledge. To the forgotten. Jenna's pulse quickened. She gasped as the world distorted around her, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Had she just stepped into a trap woven by time? The revelation gripped her, leaving her breathless. What awaited her in this horrifying realm of shadows? She could feel the weight of their gaze, the darkness coiling tighter around her. And above it all loomed the question, would she ever escape the clutches of the forgotten, or had she finally lost everything? Jenna's heart raced in her chest, a frantic drumbeat that drowned out the whispers of the figures surrounding her. Their smiles, a grotesque imitation of warmth, pierced her with an unsettling familiarity. She stepped back, her heels hitting the cold, hard stone of the circle, a barrier that felt both ancient and alive. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice echoing against the time-worn stones. The laughter slipped away, replaced by silence that wrapped around her like a noose. Another figure stepped forward, their face still obscured by a tattered hood. "We are the lost, just like him," they murmured, nodding toward the shadows where Eric's silhouette had been. "You can join us, Jenna. Freedom awaits." The weight of their words hung heavy in the air, filling her with dread. Freedom? Was it real, or just another lie? She looked around, the eyes watching her seemed to glimmer with anticipation, hungry for her next move. "No. I won tea," but doubt twisted in her gut. What if staying meant fate worse than death? What if leaving meant abandoning Eric forever? As she stood frozen, one of the figures stepped closer, the moonlight catching the edge of a hand, a claw-like appendage stained with dark marks that seemed to pulse, almost breathing. "You've already made the choice to come here to witness the truth," they said, the words dripping like honey mixed with venom. "Doesn't tea that bind you to us? You are tied now, Jenna. Get away from me!" she screamed, turning to run. But the shadows advanced, the laughter returning like a menacing chorus. Just then, the ground beneath her trembled. From the earth, unseen forces began to rise, roots twisting upward, reaching for her ankles like icy fingers. She felt the cold creeping up, binding her, immobilizing her in the very center of the circle. "No!" she cried, her voice raw with desperation. "Eric!" Her eyes darted around for his form, hoping to catch a glimpse, anything that could pull her from this nightmare. She felt a pull at her heart, the strain as Eric's voice echoed in her memory. "You must find the truth, Jenna, you need to see." A sudden roar shook the air, drowning out his words. The thing that had emerged from the shadows crept closer, the grotesque silhouette catching fragments of moonlight in its dreadful maw. The eyes that glistened like shards of glass weren't just watching her, they were drawing her in, promising dark secrets and endless power if she surrendered. "Join us," they whispered in unison, a cacophony of seduction and horror. The shadows behind them coiled tighter, transforming into shapes that mirrored Jenna's darkest fears, her family, friends, all consumed by the fog of the forgotten, their own eyes lifeless but filled with a knowledge that made her skin crawl. "Stop!" she shouted, pulling against the bonds of the earth. "I don't want any part of this." The awful grin of the front figure widened, revealing teeth that were jagged, blood-stained. "But it's too late for that, Jenna. You're deeper in than you realize. The truth is inside you, waiting to be unleashed." The ground heaved violently, shaking her to her core. Just then, her flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows, illuminating the terror that surrounded her, the air thickening with memories that did not belong to her, a haze of lost souls drawn together by the curse of the woods. Jenna's breath quickened, her pulse a frantic rhythm through her veins. "Let me go." She pulled harder against the roots, but the earth seemed to laugh, tightening its grasp as if savoring her struggle, and then, a sudden silence fell. Even the shadows paused, as Eric's voice rang clearer than before. "Jenna, you have to find me. I'm still here." Her heart wrenched, and her throat tightened with terror as a glimmer of hope sparked within her dulling resolve. What lay ahead? Would she sacrifice everything to uncover the truth? Or would she dissolve into the darkness like so many before her? As the figures moved closer, their whispers a haunting song, Jenna took a deep breath and let it out slowly, gathering whatever remnants of strength she had left. "I'll find the truth, no matter the cost." But would it be enough? The ground beneath her surged upward, the shadows swirling, and the next moment darkness consumed her. The last thing she heard was the echo of her own heartbeat, steady and persistent, battling against the encroaching despair. What awaited her in that visceral abyss? Would she awake from this nightmare, or was there something worse that lay beyond? Sudden cold enveloped Jenna as she fell deeper into the void. It felt as if the air itself thickened, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. Was this what Eric meant by the truth? Fears shivered through her as memories twisted and tangled, visions of her past flooding her mind like a torrent. She gasped as she tumbled through shadows, the ground spinning beneath her. Finally, a crash brought her to a jarring halt. She lay on damp earth, her limbs heavy as if she had been weighted down by chains. When she opened her eyes, the darkness clung to her, thick and oppressive. "Jenna," a voice broke the silence, growing clearer with every syllable. It was Eric's, but it was distorted, laced with sorrow. "You must choose." "Eric!" she shouted, panic rising anew. "Where are you?" "Find me before it's too late." The voice faded, replaced by a chilling laughter that sang from the shadows. Jenna staggered to her feet, every muscle screaming in protest. The area around her was suffused with an unnatural gloom, her flashlight flickering sporadically, casting flickers of broken light that danced across shapes that loomed in the distance. The ground was soft and wet, remnants of the earth she felt once held her like a vice. As Jenna moved forward, the shadows thickened, curling like smoke, morphing into forms that whispered accusations of her past mistakes. "You let us down," they hissed. "You abandoned us." "No." She breathed, her chest tightening. "You're not real." "Real enough," they echoed, closing in, voices blending into a cacophony that clawed at her sanity. Dark figures emerged from the gloom, each one bearing the faces of those she once loved, friends and family twisted into expressions of pain, their eyes hollow as they reached for her with desperate hands. Jenna stumbled back, the horror crashing down upon her like a wave. "Stop. You're not them. We are what you fear most, Jenna," one figure snarled, stepping closer. It was Eric's face, twisted with anguish, his lips curving into a mocking smile. "The truth of what you've done." Her chest felt tight as truth pressed against her. She wanted to believe this was just a nightmare, but the anguish in their faces was suffocating, the pain of lost moments clawing at the edges of her memory. "I didn't mean to," she pleaded, but the air grew colder, the shadows wailing louder, suffocating her in a whirlwind of guilt. Suddenly, a flash of light broke through the suffocating darkness. Jenna turned instinctively toward it, heart pounding. "Eric!" she shouted with renewed hope. Was he there, waiting, ready to pull her from the depths? But as she ran toward the light, it flickered and dimmed, revealing a new horror. The ethereal glow illuminated an outline, a doorway formed of twisting branches and murky fog. Something beyond beckoned, a darker truth waiting behind that threshold. "Choose, Jenna." The words boomed from everywhere and nowhere, pressing heavily upon her. Terror gripped her throat. Should she step through the door or fight her way back against the shadows, risking everything for the faint hope of finding Eric? The figures surged forward, clawing at her, whispering, pulling her close as if they intended to drag her into their wretched embrace. With the doorway before her, Jenna took a trembling step forward. What awaited beyond? Could she face whatever dwelled there? Would it bring her nearer to Eric, or condemn her forever? Just as she was about to make her decision, the ground quaked beneath her feet like a living entity, drawing a scream from her lips as she fell into the darkness once more. What awaited her on the other side? Would the door uncover the truth or lead her deeper into a nightmare she couldn't escape? Jenna landed hard on the other side, the ground beneath her damp and clammy, not unlike the grave she had always dreaded. The darkness was still there, but now it came with more weight, more substance, as if it were trying to bind her tightly like a shroud. She could still hear the whispered accusations, but they felt distant, like an echo fading into oblivion. Panic surged back as the shadows twisted above her, pulling at her hair, wrapping around her limbs. She scrabbled to her feet, breathing heavily, her heart racing. "Eric!" she screamed into the void, but no answer came. Just the oppressive silence, mocking her desperation. Ahead, a small flicker of light pierced the darkness, distant, yet bold. Jenna took a cautious step forward, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. The soft hum of the shadows intensified, as if warning her against that flickering hope. The ground, slick with what she dreaded to imagine, felt alive beneath her feet, pulse quickening as her bare skin growled against the cold. The light beckoned. With her heartbeat thrumming in her ears, she pushed through her terror, drawn like a moth to a flame. Step after trembling step, the brightness illuminated her surroundings. She was in a strange forest, twisted trees looming overhead, branches clawing at the starlit sky. It felt like a graveyard, ancient and full of secrets, but there was no time to feel overwhelmed. She knew one thing: she may find Eric there. Just then, she heard something, a soft crying mingling with the rustle of leaves. She turned toward the sound, stepping past the overwhelming urge to flee. "Eric?" she called softly, panic still lingering. "Help me, Jenna." The voice floated toward her. It was Eric's, wavering and filled with dread. With renewed strength, she moved toward the sound, her breath quickening as she rounded the knotted trunk of a blackened tree. There he stood, half shrouded in shadows, eyes wide and filled with a fear deeper than she had known. Beads of sweat collected on his brow. He looked disheveled and terrified. "Jenna!" he gasped, reaching out as if to grasp her hand. But his fingers didn't quite meet hers. "You shouldn't have come." "Eric, I'll help you," she cried, surging forward, but as she touched him, he flickered like a blown candlelight. "No, no, no!" he cried, his face morphing into horror. "You don't understand. You have to." Suddenly, an icy wind whipped through the forest, snatching his voice and throwing it back into the shadows. Jenna staggered back, breathless and confused. Then she felt a presence creeping up behind her. Gasping, she turned. There stood the shadows, more defined now, faces grim and soulless, and they reached for her with fingers that could pull her into eternity. "You could have saved us, Jenna," they hissed. Jenna struggled, breaking free from their grasp. She had to remember, why was she here? What had she left behind? "I won't give in," she shouted. But the shadows chuckled, their laughter sending chills down her spine. "You will, Jenna, soon enough." She spun back to Eric, his figure dissolving, leaving only the echo of their last moment, his panicked look, the desperation in his eyes. An overwhelming sense of dread crashed over her as she realized the truth that whatever cursed the forest also sought to consume her. She stumbled backward, crashing into resonance with the voices lost among the trees, clutching at her memories, which blared like sirens. The doorway behind her pulsated with light. It was a way back, but at what cost? Fear tore at her mind. Turning toward the forest, she thought of Eric and the shadows, still reaching, still seeking. And there, in the heart of the wilderness, Jenna made her choice. She ran toward the doorway, hoping for salvation, desperately holding on to the fading warmth of Eric's voice. The last thing she heard was the echoes of her past, the shadows creeping closer, mocking her. Choose wisely, Jenna. What awaited her on the other side? Would the light lead her home, or was it the beginning of a deeper nightmare? Jenna lunged forward, throwing herself into the doorway, and the light engulfed her. A moment of warmth enveloped her, brief and tantalizing. Then she was dropped back into a chill that was sharper than before. The light behind her flickered away, and she was left in darkness once more. She landed not on soft ground, but on hard, cracked pavement. Confusion gripped her, and the air was thick with an acrid scent. It was different from the earthy musk of the forest. This felt like a dying world. Jenna pushed herself to her feet, breathless, her heart still pounding like a war drum. Shadows danced in her peripheral vision, and a faint hum reverberated through her bones, a sound she recognized now, the whisper of the cursed. "Eric," she called, her voice trembling as it echoed into the void. There was no answer, only silence, punctuated by the sound of a scuttling creature in the dark. She peered into the obscurity around her, anxiety coiling tight in her stomach. To her left, an industrial building loomed, its windows dark and uninviting. Cracked concrete walls stretched out like the gnarled hands of the damned. Jenna instinctively knew that she had stepped into something far worse. The shadows were thicker here, almost liquid, and she could feel them reforming around her, closing in. You shouldn't have come, they hissed, a multitude of voices rising and falling like a twisted choir. Something caught her eye in the distance, a flicker of light, brighter and steadier than before. Jenna took a cautious step forward, compelled to move toward it. Each step felt heavy, almost like dragging herself through treacle. The closer she got, the more she could hear the sound of desperate sobbing mixed with malicious laughter. It was a horrible duet that sent shivers racing over her skin. "Help me," came a voice, familiar and haunting. "Eric!" Jenna shouted, recognizing the tone of despair that twisted her heart. "I'm coming." She stumbled toward the light, the sounds merging into a chaotic muddle as she approached what appeared to be an abandoned train yard. Rusting cars lay scattered like carcasses in a graveyard. Flickering shadows morphed into grotesque shapes, twirling and writhing beneath the ominous glow, playing tricks with her mind. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted behind her. She swung around to see one of the train cars shift, as if something large had moved within. The shadows skittered away, momentarily revealing a pair of glowing eyes peering through the darkness. Jenna's heart stuttered, a surge of fear flooding her senses. "Don't let it take you, Jenna." Eric's voice rang out, frantic. She gritted her teeth, tearing her gaze away from those eyes that hungered and searched for her soul. "Hold on!" she screamed, launching herself toward the light. The shadows licked at her heels, pulling angrily at her, as if they wanted nothing more than to drag her back into their realm. "Don't look back." Eric's voice echoed, now more urgent, but the fear screamed louder. Panic surged as the glowing eyes began to move, creeping closer through the wreckage. The light illuminated a small group of figures bound together, desperately clawing at the very air that surrounded them. They seemed trapped, faces twisted in anguish. As Jenna closed the distance, their mouths opened wide, screaming in horror as they melted into the shadows behind her, consumed without a trace. "No!" she gasped, realization hitting her like a freight train. Those weren't just souls, they were victims. Jenna broke into a sprint, terror driving her. If they had been trapped, what fate awaited her? Would she become another whisper among the shadows, or could she save Eric before it was too late? The shadows surged forward, an otherworldly force clawing at her, trying to shackle her down in despair. As she reached for the light ahead, she felt the weight of those figures behind her, their cries piercing the veil of darkness. "Run, Jenna!" Eric's voice urged her, a beacon of hope amidst the dark. But would hope be enough to outpace the enemies that sought to bind her forever? And what would happen when she reached that light? Just as she neared the flicker, the ground trembled, and an unearthly wail echoed through the train yard, resonating deep within her. Something awaited her there. Would it be salvation or her doom? The moment hung in the air like a gunshot. Would she slip into eternity, or could she grasp the light before it vanished? She hesitated, heart racing, breath quickening. Was she strong enough to face what lay ahead? Jenna's heart thundered in her chest as she surged toward the light. It pulsated in front of her, promising safety, reveling in her desperation. Yet, with each step, shadows clawed at her, pulling her back, whispering her name in a raspy language that chilled her to the bone. "Run!" she cried out again, but the echoes of the shadowy figures behind her drowned her voice. The air around her crackled with energy, alive with the intensity of a storm. She barely noticed as her feet found purchase on the uneven ground, the train yard a chaotic blur of rusting metal and suffocating blackness. With one last frantic burst of speed, she reached the edge of the light. It exploded around her, casting back the tendrils that reached for her like skeletal fingers. The illumination revealed a small platform, shrouded in flimsy, flickering lanterns. Beneath its glow sat her brother, Eric, bound to a rotting bench, eyes wide with panic. "Jenna!" he yelled, straining against the chains that bit into his skin. "Hang on. I'll get you out." She felt hope surge through her. Eric was alive. She rushed forward, instincts overwhelming the encroaching shadows still howling in the distance. But as she approached, a gnawing sense of dread tangled itself tightly around her heart. The moment she reached for Eric, a low growl resonated all around, shattering her moment of relief. An enormous figure emerged from the darkness, its form 15 feet tall and woven from shadow, a grotesque hybrid of a nightmare. The glowing eyes, the same ones she had seen earlier, now filled a face carved from pure malice. "Leave him," it hissed, voice like nails on glass, "or you will join him." Jenna's stomach dropped. The urges to flee and to fight warred within her. Eric looked at her, desperation etched in every feature. "You have to believe me. You're running out of time." The chains rattled around him, metal clanging against the bench like thunder. "No. I won't leave you." She lunged forward, the creature's cold laugh echoing around her, the kind of laughter that promised despair. With trembling hands, she pulled at the chains, desperation fueling her. How could she choose? The risk of losing him against the inevitability of becoming just another shadow herself. The creature's laughter deepened, twisting into something almost human. "Your love is your greatest weakness," it taunted, dark eyes shimmering with a grotesque delight. "Jenna, stop!" Eric shouted, and his voice stabbed through the haze of fear. "The chains, it's feeding on your despair. You need to think." In that moment, clarity struck like lightning. She couldn't succumb to fear. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes and focused on the light, the warmth that had embraced her before. She envisioned a barrier, something powerful enough to push back the darkness. Silently, she whispered, "I choose hope." As the words slipped from her lips, a pulse of energy erupted from her core, radiating outward like ripples on water. The shadows recoiled, the laughter faltering as the light expanded, a luminescent shield forming between them and the grotesque creature. "Eric!" She screamed, hands outstretched, reaching for him through the shroud. He strained against the chains, and Jenna pushed her will into the light, drawing it toward him. The creature writhed, angered and shocked. "You think your light can save him?" It screeched, rage drowning out the shadow's whispers. "Just go." Eric yelled again. "Run, Jenna. I'll catch you." But something deep inside told her that abandoning him was not the answer. The energy of hope surged and swelled, the light intensifying like 1,000 stars igniting. As she glanced over her shoulder, she saw the creature falter, cracks appearing in its shadowy skin. With a fierce determination, she dove into the light, dragging her brother with her. They both screamed as they plunged into the radiance, the shadows snapping at their heels. The world around them shimmered and warped, colors spilling like paint. But as they emerged, a bone-chilling realization struck Jenna. The train yard was gone, but the echoes of the lost were still palpable around her, the air thick with heart-wrenching moans of despair. They gasped for breath, standing in another desolate realm, still trapped yet now somewhere new, a place thicker with darkness than any shadows they had faced before. Jenna turned to Eric, eyes wide with horror. "What have we done?" "There's more," he whispered, and a cold sweat dripped down her back as she felt at the unrelenting gaze of the creature lurking in the distance, shadows slithering back into existence. How many more layers of darkness awaited? And could they ever escape? The tensions rose, fear tightening around them. What would they face next? With a surge of fear coursing through her veins, Jenna grasped Eric's hand tight, their breaths a collective rhythm of urgency as shadows twisted and contorted around them. They were encased in this new realm, ominous and thick with despair, the air saturated with echoes of mournful wails bouncing off unseen walls. Each shadow seemed alive, breathing, whispering secrets just beyond her understanding. "Stay close," Jenna urged, her voice firm despite the tremors dancing at her fingertips. As they stepped forward, the ground beneath them morphed like a living entity, pulsating with a weight that attempted to drain their very essence. "Do you feel that?" Eric asked, his voice barely a whisper, a lump forming in his throat. "Yeah, it's like we can't escape," Jenna replied, her heart racing. "But we have to try." Together, they moved deeper into the heart of this dark realm, darkness closing in with every step. Shapes began to fill the void, shadowy figures emerging from the gloom, their faces familiar yet grotesque. There were their friends, family, lost souls from their past, faces twisted by anguish and despair. Each one of them stretched out a hand, fingers curling like claws, pulling at the edges of Jenna's sanity. "Jenna, remember us," one figure crooned, its voice slithering through the darkness like smoke, laden with sorrow. "No," she cried, her resolve hardening. "You aren't real. You can't have me." The figures recoiled, leaving only silence, but the shadows twisted and swirled, now seeking revenge for her defiance. "Run!" Eric shouted, his grip tightening around her wrist. They dodged between the flickering shapes, pushing forward through a thick haze of despair. It felt like an eternity spent weaving through the abhorrent memories, echoes battling to ensnare them. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble violently beneath them. A familiar growl filled the air, deep and resonant, sent backward through their spines. The creature was near, closing in on them like a predator stalking its prey. "Jenna! We need to find the light!" Eric yelled, terror coating his voice. "Where?" she gasped, her fear crescendoing. But at that moment, the shadows parted, revealing a blinding light, its brilliance stark against the suffocating darkness. "Go! Now!" Eric yelled, propelling Jenna toward the glow. He stood there, staring back at the approaching darkness with unwavering determination. "I'll hold them back." "Eric! No! Please!" Her protests tumbled out chaotically, but he shook his head forcefully. "Don't look back. Just go," he urged, knowing too well that fear could be just as dangerous as the beast. With one last lingering glance, Jenna bolted into the light. The warmth enveloped her like a comforting embrace, wrapping her in hope and strength. As she crossed the threshold, another wave of energy surged through her. The darkness roared behind her, angry, furious at being defied, but she pushed forward, feeling the fire within her ignite. The energy of all the loved ones lost, all the memories still alive in her heart surged, propelling her deeper into the light. Jenna opened her eyes, and instead of another realm of shadows, she was standing in the familiar woods of her childhood. The moon hung low, bathing the landscape in silver light, and the trees stood tall and unyielding, their branches whispering in the gentle breeze. She felt his presence before she saw him. Eric stood at the edge of the clearing, looking confused but alive. "Jenna?" he called, voice hesitant, eyes searching. "Eric." She ran toward him, heart soaring, embracing him fiercely. "You're really here. We made it." Eric pulled back and stared at her intensely. "What happened? I thought we were lost forever. I think we broke the curse." "But the others," Jenna began, but the pain of remembering their faces washed over her. "They had escaped the shadows, but at what cost?" "I know," Eric said solemnly. "They are still there. We can't forget them." He paused, his voice softer. "But we're free." Jenna stepped back, allowing the moment to settle. The weight of those lost lingered in the air around them, lingering like their heavy souls intertwined with her heart. "We have to do something," she whispered, a new resolve blossoming within. "Yes. We need to find a way to help them," Eric said with determination, a hint of fire igniting in his eyes. Together, they stood in the clearing, marked forever by their experience. They had faced darkness together and emerged into light, but the journey ahead was far from over. The woods still held secrets, remnants of shadows ready to haunt them. "Let us follow the path," she said, taking a step. "We owe it to them to try." With renewed hope pulsing through her veins, Jenna took Eric's hand as they stepped into the night's embrace, ready to navigate both the past and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. They would face whatever came together, forging a new path toward healing, not only for themselves but for the souls still tethered to the darkness, refusing to let despair win. And as they walked into the shadows, their hearts ignited with the promise of a new dawn. Now, don't you go anywhere. You need to subscribe immediately and hit that bell, so you don't miss any of our exclusive stories coming out next. Smash the like button now, because it really fuels the algorithm to push these amazing tales even further. And I want to hear from you. Flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about Jenna and Eric's journey. And please, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this thrilling conclusion. This is the moment to show your support for the channel. Don't wait even one more second.